This year's SCCS-Bengaluru conference. We have for today Janice Pariat, who's going to be speaking on a case for the long perspective for life, writing, and healing the world. Before that, I'd like to commend all of you. Thank you for those of you who made it to the conference, and especially thank you to those who made it to the popular plenary today. A very warm welcome to all of you from the SCCS-Bengaluru family. I hope participants have been having a good conference so far. I hope you've been enjoying the events, the talks, the workshops, who's who, and we have some more events lined up for you tomorrow. When I think of my own initial SCCS conferences about a decade ago, I remember it was a mix of joy and disappointment, a little bit of angst, and that's what created the memories that linger with me and other people who attended those conferences way back then. And I hope you will have that experience and you will create memories of your own by the time that the conference ends tomorrow. Before I proceed, I have a couple of announcements to make. The first is for the volunteers. Those volunteers who are not handling AV, please make sure that the doors remain shut. Volunteers who are not handling AV, please ensure that the doors remain shut. Thank you. The second announcement I have is for participants. Those participants who have been put up in accommodation in and around ISC, some of you have not yet made payment. So I request you to kindly make payment because our finance team is winding up by tomorrow 12 p.m. So if you could pay for your rooms, that would be really very nice. Thank you very much. We still have about 13 bursary applicants who have not submitted their details. Bursary applicants who have not submitted their details, please do so by 12 p.m. tomorrow. We really hope you will be able to do that. Otherwise, it will be difficult for us to process your payments, your reimbursements. Thank you very much for that. We'll now move quickly to the plenary, and I will request Amrita Neelakantan, my friend, to introduce Janice Pariat, and we'll get on with the plenary. Thank you very much.
I'll go again. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Janice Pariat is a poet, writer, assistant professor of creative writing and the history of art at Ashoka University. She's widely known for her unique literary style. Many of us already know this. We're here for this. That blends creative nonfiction with folktale, local stories, magical stuff, and socio-ecological knowledge from Meghalaya, a lot of times. You call it Meghalaya. We'll get into that in a bit. Meghalaya.
Yeah.
She studied English literature at St. Stephen's in Delhi and history of art at SOAS, London. Her work includes art reviews, book reviews, fiction and poetry, and the books you're all probably carrying. And it's featured among many national magazines and newspapers, and we know that. We've read these things. She was awarded the Young Writer Award from the Sahitya Academy and the Crossword Book Award in 2013. In 2014, she was a Charles Wallace Creative Writing Fellow at the University of Kent in the UK, and a writer in residence at the TOJI residency in South Korea. Is that Toji or TOJI?
Toji. Yeah.
Toji. Her novel, Everything the Light Touches, was published a year back in October, exploring some of the most important ideas, I feel, that for society and conservation should consider in our shared future. You can get a copy from outside at the Champaka store, and if you haven't already got one. More personally, it's been a joy. I think Janice and I first met on the internet when the internet was new.
Yeah.
When trolls didn't exist, guys, and blogs were safe spaces.
I'm sure that's never been true, to be honest.
But it was one of those times where you'd put up adventures as young adults on your personal blog, and friends would come and read it, and you'd teach each other how to write better. It was just a magical time at that point. Or maybe it was magical because we were that age. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been a joy to follow that journey. Kafirati posts, the birth and promise of Pirta. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And to know that it's now bigger and doing many things. That was a nice chat to have about it. And to the launch of Boats on Land, which I'm pretty sure I went to and we met there as well.
Yeah.
But this is what a few years will do to you. You'll forget some of these important things and just remember the feeling. In a return to those perhaps slower, simpler times, it is my honor to introduce her to you all at SCCS on a topic so close to my own evolution in thinking about how we do conservation. The title of her talk today is so timely as many of you embark on your own careers in conservation, and it highlights a central idea to our journeys ahead. Please join me in a warm welcome to Janice from all of us at SCCS. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for just those most generous words of introduction, really. And I'm sure we've met before. But, you know, paths cross and recross just when they're meant to. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for being here. I'm so honored and so grateful to be given a chance to join you for this most wonderful and most timely event. I've been on your campus since last evening, and I have a bit of a crick in the neck because I haven't stopped looking at the trees. They're beautiful and just the most sprawling and embracive, and you walk below them and you feel that you're protected. Okay, I'll stop there. But I really love your campus, and it's such a pleasure and such a privilege to be here. I think it's very brave of you, of the organizers, to be bestowing this kind of responsibility on a writer. Writers are usually sort of hiding away in a little room somewhere in self-imposed exile, being horribly antisocial. And here I am, you know, invited to deliver a talk to, I was going to say room full of people, which is what I'd written in my speech, but it's an auditorium full of people. I am not nervous at all. In fact, I'm not even in the slightest bit petrified. But I shall do my best, and I hope that what I share with you today is something that you find helpful or in some way resonant. Yeah. So what I will be talking about today is the long perspective, and I wish I could, you know, sit here and say, oh, it's something that I've always been thinking about, and the long perspective is something that my life and my work has engaged with always, but that's not true at all. It's something that I only came to realize the importance of when I started working on my book, Everything the Light Touches, which, as Amrita already mentioned, it's doing funky things, I know. I don't know how, but it is. Which was published exactly a year ago, last October. So for those of you who may not be familiar with the book, Everything the Light Touches is an interweaving of a quartet of stories, of narratives across geographies, across times, and it asks many questions, I think. But one of its central concerns is epistemological in nature, right? So it's about how do we know, and what is the process of knowing, right? And Everything the Light Touches uses science, it uses botany as a portal, as a way to sort of explore this, right? So 3 of the 4 characters in the book are scientists. One of them is Carl Linnaeus, who you may be familiar with. The other one is Goethe, the poet and the playwright from Germany. Another is Evelyn, a young Edwardian fictional, a young Edwardian woman, and they're all botanists, yeah? And the 4th character is Shai, and she's a young woman from the northeast of India, and she has a particularly interesting, sort of slightly different scientific bent of mind, and she offers us what I like to call the long perspective. Yeah. So I had my first brush with the long perspective when I attended a talk. Oh, wait, hang on. Before I delve into the beginnings of the long perspective, I'd just like to make it clear that I'd like to explore the long perspective through 3 texts. Yeah. And these 3 texts are right up there. They are honestly the pillars of support for everything the light touches. Yeah. And these texts also shaped me on a personal front as a writer, and also I think made me reinterrogate some of the most pressing contemporary ecological concerns of our time. Yeah. So back to where I started, at a talk, very much like this one, by Pranay Lal, on his incredible book that you might, again, already be familiar with. Yeah, so Indica, A Deep Natural History of the Indian Subcontinent. I have to admit, I went for the talk, I hadn't read the book, okay? We don't do that, of course, but admittedly, this one time, I had just heard about it. I'd heard such good things about Indica, and I was very intrigued. So I attended the talk, and the talk was amazing. And at some point towards the end, Pranay, was talking about plastic and how, given the vast amounts of plastic that we generate as a species, that the Earth's soil was, slowly changing in its chemical makeup. And I'm sitting there bracing myself, because this is the stuff of nightmares, right? This is what we talk about. This is what we hear about, how plastic is killing our planet. It's choking our oceans. And Pranay, and I'll never forget this, all he said in the most calm, collected manner, he said, "We'll see how it goes." And for the life of me, I couldn't wrap my head around how he could be so calm about this, until, of course, I read his book. And Indica, as you know, grapples with, I need to check numbers always, grapples with a span of 4.6 billion years. And when you're grappling with a timeline of that scale, pretty much everything fades into quiet insignificance. Humanity's acts of hubris, even the terrors of plastic and climate change. In the book, for example, you learn about trilobites, yeah? So marine arthropods, these creatures that ruled the seas for 270 million years before they became extinct. And how long have we been around? Possibly a more modest, 200,000 years, arguably, yeah? Then you learn about, the velvet sort of green that you see on the forest floor. 300 million years ago, these club mosses were towering to about 100 feet high. So species shrink and shift. They come and they go, and our Earth has been through several ice ages and several arid ages, including, what they call, or what some people call the Great Dying, some 251 million years ago, right? When there were a number of triggers, but one of them was that there was an unusually high level of methane in the atmosphere, global warming. And pretty much all of life, including the trilobites, were extinguished. I think only a very lucky 4% survived. And it took the Earth, well, it took about 10 million years for life to kind of reset, to renew, for the Earth to renew itself. So really, it's miraculous that we are here. And we happen to be one in a very long line of species that have made this planet our home over the last 3.8 billion years, which is how long, life has been around. The Earth manages fine without us. If we're not there, she continues. She resets herself. She rises. And I would imagine that this thought by itself is enough to instill the deepest humility in us, right? This is what Indica gave me, this kind of shift, this kind of perspective. And I would say that our very arrogant species is in dire need of exactly this, right? Some perspective. And this is where I thought we could find it, within this long perspective. How small and fleeting we are, and we are mere visitors. We're here, and then we're gone. But why do I bring up humility? Why is humility important? Many reasons, yeah? Humility allows us room to grow, to correct ourselves, to learn, to dislocate human centrism, yeah? And most importantly, I think, humility also makes way for gratitude, yeah? Thankfulness. Because not only are we a rather arrogant species, we also tend to be quite brashly ungrateful and very entitled. So we look around us and we think that we can exert ownership on land and water, and that we can drill and fell and mine and extract all the resources of the earth. And I think that when we bring gratitude into the equation, something shifts. And that something has to do with a certain lightness and a certain gentleness. I learned about this in a book that I would honestly call a guide to life. Yeah? Braiding Sweetgrass. Indigenous wisdom, scientific knowledge, and the teachings of plants. Braiding Sweetgrass, and I say this with a reason, it truly brought me home. So Robin Kimmerer, is a botanist. Yeah? So she asks questions about the natural world using the tools of Western science, but she's also a Native American. She's a member of the Potawatomi nation, yeah, which believes and which embraces the notion that plants and animals are our oldest teachers. So in Braiding Sweetgrass, she brings these lenses of knowledge together, yeah, and shows us that the awakening of a wider ecological consciousness requires the acknowledgement and the celebration of our reciprocal relationship to the rest of the living world. Yeah? And at the heart of this awakening, what does she place? She places gratitude. And she does this by drawing on the rituals and beliefs of her own indigenous community. And here lay such a surprise, because I found that there were so many similarities between the things that she was saying and the things that I had experienced back in the Khasi Hills, where I come from, in Meghalaya. So for example, She would talk about this ritual that her father would do every morning, where he would pour a little bit of his freshly brewed coffee into the earth. And it brought to mind how at home we set aside, always, first of all, we set aside a little part of our meal, of our daily meals, for Meiram O, for Mother Earth, to thank her, to say we are grateful for the nourishment that you give us. So it's no surprise that, Kimera says many native or indigenous peoples across the world, and I'm quoting her, despite myriad cultural differences, have this in common. We are rooted in cultures of gratitude. Yeah? And why might gratitude be important? This is why I wanted this to be a workshop, so you could do some thinking. But why might gratitude be important? Again, many reasons. Gratitude makes us appreciative. It makes us generally nicer people. Come on. It makes us positive. It makes us present in the moment, right? And no matter how innocent a gesture of gratitude or a feeling of gratitude or an expression of gratitude might be, Kimera calls it the most revolutionary act, especially in a consumerist society where contentment, I'm quoting her again, is a radical proposition. So recognizing abundance, she says, rather than scarcity, undermines an economy that thrives by creating endless unmet desires. But it's not enough to just be grateful. And this is very important. This sense of gratitude must transform into a sense of reciprocity, right? And she says this. Cultures of gratitude must also be cultures of reciprocity. Each person, human or more than human, is bound to every other in a reciprocal relationship. Just as all beings have a duty to me, I have a duty to them. If an animal gives its life to feed me, I am in turn bound to support its life. If I receive a stream's gift of pure water, then I am responsible for returning a gift in kind. An integral, I can't say the word, an integral part of a human's education. I thought this was so important. An integral part of a human's education is to know those duties and how to perform them. Yeah? So in this way, ownership transforms into stewardship, yeah? Into a way of living that attempts to step lightly on the planet. Because to treat the natural world with respect is to treat yourself with respect, and vice versa, of course. In this way, we learn to be gentle, and the long perspective paves the way for this. Now, you might remember that I said braiding sweetgrass brought me home, and it really did, in many, many ways. It, in some ways, encouraged me to return to place, to belonging, to community, and to indigeneity. This book made me realize that the ways that we learn about the world consequently shape how we relate to her. Yeah? Western science tends to be a science of the analytical, the mechanistic, even the deeply patriarchal. It asks of an object, what is it? How does it work? Whereas indigenous forms of knowledge call for something else, but something else no less rigorous. It calls for the tactile, the experiential, the holistic, for the recognition of agency and subjectivity, for the aliveness of the world, for spirit, for soul, consequently for respect and reverence. It asks of a subject, what may I learn from you? this return to the indigenous, to indigenous ways of knowing, isn't something that I've made up or that's come out of nowhere. There's an article in Down to Earth, a magazine that I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, are familiar with. There's an article that talks about this, that speaks of how, despite many divisions, India's indigenous cultures remain the antithesis of capitalism and industrialization. And how so? In their age-old knowledge and value systems that promote long-term sustainability through showing restraint in what is taken from nature, in their emphasis on equality and sharing rather than competition and hierarchy, and in the resilience of dozens of movements against land grab by mining and construction companies. So I would say that to return to the long perspective is to return to the indigenous. In everything the light touches, the tussle lies between fixity, fluidity, between the deadening and the enlivening, between nature, natured, and nature, naturing, between the frozen and the constantly coming into being. And this long perspective allowed me to trace this struggle. So in order to critique the tenets of Western science in the novel, it was necessary for me to understand where these beliefs came from, right? The context within which they arose. And the journey took me way back into the Enlightenment, into 17th and 18th century Europe. A time when, in order to understand the world, it was believed that you had to name it, you had to tame it, you had to order it in a particular way. And of course, in this order, humans were placed at the pinnacle of evolution. We were the darlings of creation, and everything else comes below, right? It was also a time where, sadly, it's still a prevalent, idea, a time when human supremacy, the idea of human supremacy was bolstered, which obviously means that all life and all matter on this planet exist only to serve us, right? And that leads consequently to us refusing to acknowledge ecological limits, right? I would say that this is where the roots of our climate change crisis lie. And I know that it seems like such a contemporary concern. It seems so here and now. Even the word crisis feels so pressing, right? We must do something about it now. It's so contemporary, but it isn't. Climate change, the ecological crisis, are often mistaken for contemporary concerns, but it's important that they are historicized and placed within this wide ambit of complex continuities. The crisis began long ago in a shift in the relationship between the earth and the human. And I'm not quite alone here. Recently, Amitav Ghosh published, and you might be familiar with this text, published The Nutmeg's Curse, which actually employs this long perspective and argues that the dynamics of our current ecological crisis are rooted in centuries-old forces, combined forces of Western capitalism and colonialism, and our crisis, he shows, is ultimately the result of this mechanistic view of the earth, where nature exists, again, as a resource only for humans, for our own ends, rather than a being, a force of her own, right? Full of agency and meaning. Yes. Oh, yes, of course. Oh my God, sure. I know, and my voice is a little bit on the soft side. Better? Better? Can you hear me now? Um, okay, should I start again? Yeah, they're like, uh-oh. We should have just pretended we could hear everything. I know, come sit in the front. Yeah. So to continue, I've come to realize that the long perspective gives us a wide and deep context, right? It gives us this kind of vast context within which to work to begin to understand an issue. Much wider, much deeper than what a few decades perhaps offers us, right? Because the stories of the world are much longer, much older than that. And they are so ferociously, so intricately entangled. I'm not sure whether any long-term solutions can be found and enforced, perhaps, without taking into account what the long perspective illuminates for us. Perhaps conservation for all of us truly begins at the point where there is a shift in our relationship to our planet, where we begin to operate from a place of humility and gratitude and respect and love for Mother Earth. In the time that I've been prepping for this talk, I've been thinking so much about, what have I learned by looking into the deep past? What do I get out of this as a person, as a writer? And to begin with, it's become that much more important for me to reflect on what gets carried on over the generations, right? What is inherited in terms of the inheritance of stories, patterns of behavior, violence and trauma even, right? And this is both for me and my fictional characters. Our stories on and off the page begin long before we are born, long before we come into existence. So we carry all of our ancestors' stories with us, right? And even the stories of the universe coming into being. Think about it, yeah? When did you begin? When did you begin? On your birthday? Or on the birthday of every single human who has come before you? And before that, in the birth and death of stars, from where the elements in our bodies come from, iron and oxygen, carbon and calcium, over the course of billions of years and multiple galactic lifetimes, right? So with the recognition that everyone's biographies span over hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, it has admittedly been a bit difficult for me to write a short story. But I'd like to think that learning to look into the deep past offers us something really special. It offers us the ability to investigate quite deeply who you are, what stories you might carry, why we might behave the way we do. And perhaps most importantly, with this self-awareness, we can begin to heal. For as Robin Kimmerer says, to heal ourselves is to heal the earth. And to heal the earth is to heal ourselves. Finally, the text that really enlarged my understanding of the long perspective to an even greater degree was Robert Macfarlane's Underland, A Deep Time Journey. So it's a book that's all about the subterranean, yeah? Root and soil and stone. And he embarks on this epic journey through the world's underlands, right? In myth and literature, in memory, and of course, the land herself. And to journey underground, he says, is to journey through time. So he's been in, I think Norwegian sea caves, and he, I think, somehow manages to get to the heart of the Greenland ice cap, and he does many of these journeys. But in here, in this text, I learned that the long perspective allows us to look both ways. Quite like the Greek god, you know, Janus, he looks in front and he looks at the back. So of course, the long perspective allows us to look deep into the past for wider context, wider understanding, but it also allows us to look into the deep future. Now, McFarlane says, and I think he's right about this, that to think deeply ahead in time actually runs quite contrary to how our brains function. And so, you know, if we try it now, yeah, try it yourself. Let's imagine a year ahead, okay? Now 10 years. Now a century. Imagination, I think, is beginning to falter. Details are thinning out. Try 1,000 years. Mist descends, right? So beyond 100 years, even generating some sort of picture of, you know, our social situation, of who we are as individuals, it becomes really, really difficult. Let alone extending compassion across even greater reaches of time towards the unborn inhabitants of worlds to be. I mean, honestly, it's difficult. As a species, McFarlane says, we have proved to be quite good or quite decent historians, but very poor futurologists. Yeah. While we have, you know, abbreviations for marking out deep time in the past, BP for before present, or MYA for million years ago, we have no equivalent abbreviations for marking out deep time in the future. So no one says BP or AP, sorry, for after present, or MYA for million years ahead. But why is McFarlane so insistent that it is important for us to look forward into the deep future? It's important because it allows us to ask a particular question, perhaps the most important question of all. It allows us to ask, are we being good ancestors? Yeah? He says this, what legacies will we leave behind, not only for the generations that succeed us, but also for the epochs and species that will come after ours? The Anthropocene compels us to think forwards in deep time and to weigh what we will leave behind, as the landscapes we are making now will sink into strata, becoming underlands. What is the history of things to come? What will be our future fossils? As we have amplified our ability to shape the world, so we become more responsible for the long afterlives of that shaping. The Anthropocene asks of us the question memorably posed by the immunologist Jonas Salk: are we being good ancestors? This question, I think, just reminds us again that we are here fleetingly, that we live on a planet borrowed from our children and our children's children, that we are stewards of our living world. And it's an idea that Robin Kimmerer returns to over and over again in Braiding Sweetgrass. What is the world that we will leave behind? And she says something very powerful about this. The relationship of gratitude and reciprocity thus developed can increase the evolutionary fitness of both plant and animal. A species and a culture that treat the natural world with respect and reciprocity will surely pass on genes for ensuing ensuing generations with a higher frequency than the people who destroy it. The stories we choose to shape our behaviors have adaptive consequences. I think if we ask this question now, are we being good ancestors, we might perhaps resoundingly say, no, not really. But you know, these books and these writers and all the writers like them really brought me hope. Because to write is an act of hope. To converse is an act of hope. To gather in a space like this for a talk like this and many others is an act of hope. In each of our efforts, no matter how small, in each of our efforts to leave behind a better world, there is a refusal to give in to despair. Thank you. We're good?
Okay. That was amazing. Thanks,
Oh my
Janice.
God.
And I was going to say, I think we're open for questions now. Yeah, to the
Of
audience.
course.
Yeah. So if people can pass around the other mic, and if there are questions for Janice or just something that resonated with you, jump in.
Yes, please. That would be really
And we'll
nice.
hop back.
Yes, please. Come. Oh my God, so thirsty.
Hello.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello.
I wanted to ask, like, in a time when everything, every aspect of life right now is run by the economic benefits, even we are quantifying the benefits of having trees, and that's how we convince decision makers that
Yeah.
they have more monetary value or not. How do we convince, how do we create a world where even the decision makers look at this long perspective that you talk of?
That where even these
Decision maker
makers,
look at the long perspective
the
that
long
you speak
perspective,
of.
it starts with us, no? Here, now. It begins in this room with all of us. I mean, half an hour ago, we had not talked about the long perspective, and now we have. And I cannot think of a more appropriate, a more important place to start than with us. Because it is about building relationship. And first of all, it is about building relationship with yourself so that your relationship with the world takes a certain shape. And, you know, these things have resonances. At least from what I learned in therapy, if your behavior changes, because that's all you can control, those have rippling effects on everyone around you. And there's a shift. If there's a shift in you, there's a shift around you. I don't know what the big answer is, but I know what the small answer is. It's you, us, here, now, expanding the idea of conservatorship, actually even shifting it to stewardship, to saying that we are here to look after. And perhaps those conversations will resonate, will become bigger conversations. And that's where the hope lies, honestly. Yeah?
Thank you.
He's not convinced.
Vote for the long perspective.
Yes.
There's one behind you.
Thanks. That was a great talk. It's sad to miss the first bit of
Thank
it.
you. Could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So there's been this sort of meme going around on the internet, which
Yeah.
says that I hope you understand that the anger and violence with which we seek to change the world comes from the softest part of me. And I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh, that's a bit heartbreaking. But I think if we transform that softness into anger and violence, that's what will be perpetuated. And perhaps if we take that softness and we hold it and we heal it, and we work with it, and we approach others around us, acknowledging that there is softness and hurt and grief there too, perhaps what will be perpetuated is kindness rather than anger and violence. I don't know how far those will go. I hope that helps.
Hi, Janice. Great talk. A lot of ideas to contend with. But as a young person, thinking about things at such a long scale perhaps is a little challenging considering the amount of uncertainty that exists in our lives. Being in this field and being young researchers in this
Yeah.
field is immense, right? So while things like the fact that we are custodians of this world for a future generation are things that we have all imbibed in ourselves over the
Yes.
years,
Yes.
it's very difficult to kind of reconcile that with your personal being, right? So how do you contend with this uncertainty as a young person? Your thoughts?
I think that the long perspective can, in some ways, instill uncertainty and anxiety, but also it instills liberation and freedom because it offers us that kind of wide, deep context. And within that, we can do only so much. We can do what we can given the constraints that we have. I'm going to share with you something that I tell myself as a writer, and maybe it'll help you in whatever else you may be doing, because I feel like this crosses all boundaries. So there's an essay by an American writer named Anne Patchett, where she talks about what it means to write, bringing out a book, and she says, the thing that you really have to remember and hold close as a writer, perhaps as a human being, really, I would add, is that you have to forgive yourself. That you can only do the best that you can do given all of these massive constraints that you are working within. And these constraints are many, and they come from everywhere, both internal and external. But that's what allows you to continue and to keep going, to forgive yourself and say, this is the best book that I could write at this time. This is the best work that I could do at this time. And I will forgive myself and I will continue. Yeah?
Hi, ma'am. Thank you for a great talk. So I always get confused with this perspectives that I understand these perspectives of collective and shared pain and healing,
Yeah.
what it connects to us. But when we work with the communities on field who face atrocities on daily basis,
Yeah.
so there to realize these long perspectives become a very challenging issue, and it also poses a challenge on our own identity, that how differently I act in those, and do I have that liberty at that time to think about that this shared long perspective and that collective healing process at that time, and to ignore or maybe sideline the systems which exist in the human societies, the law, the economy, which deeply impact the communities.
Yeah.
So it always makes me to question myself, that is it the right, and since being a young researcher, it always poses that question, that is it the right time to chase that collective perspective and to take a zen, like for me, I just sometimes feel that that's a zen mode for me.
Right.
So
Right.
if you could
Right.
share on that.
Right. Well, I mean, if I've understood, what you were asking correctly, I would say that, and this is, the two things that come up at the beginning of the talk, which is that the long perspective, whatever else it might give you, offers you the chance to instill humility and gratitude and kindness within you. So if that is the space to operate on when you are out doing field work in very complicated situations, surely that is the space then I would say to act from, right? The space of humility, the space of respect and gratitude, and to allow for stories to be heard, to be shared, to be listened to, and then seeing or crafting what you might need or what might be required of you to do next. I haven't had quite the experience that you have had, of course, as a young researcher doing what you do. But, I often get asked, how do you write about a certain community's sort of experiences? As a writer, what is appropriation? Where do you draw that line? And it's very tricky. But I would say that the only space that one can operate from is of empathy and of listening, of kindness. And that's where it begins, I guess. If I've understood your question correctly, I'm not sure, but I hope that helps. Are we?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think we're out of time. I'm going to head back. Oh, one more question? If there's one more question, we'll take it. Here, right in the, wait, why don't you take my mic? Here you go.
I really enjoyed your talk, and you've got a really beautiful voice as well. The
Thank
question
you.
I wanted to ask you is, since you write in multiple modes, I think you mentioned that you write poetry and fiction, non-fiction as well. Like, do you have
Yeah.
sort of different target audiences or different sort of goals for each kind of sort of mode that you write in?
The only audience that I begin with is myself. When I start any story, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, and where those lines lay is a discussion for another day. But when I'm starting a project, whether it's a small little article for a magazine or a novel or a short story or even a poem, I'm telling that story first and foremost to myself. And I need to be engaged, and I need to be surprised, and I need to be entertained, and I need to feel something for this story that I'm telling. And if I can do that, if I can write something that does all of those things to me, I can only hope that it does the same for anyone else that this story might sort of find its way to. To try and think of target audience or how someone might react or who you're writing for is such a pointless exercise because it is completely out of your control. The only thing that you do have in your control is what you do, how you respond, how you feel about your work. The rest is completely unpredictable, right? So that's how it goes. I'm writing for myself to begin with. Yeah. Oh, thank you.